A very strange thing is happening in Malta right now. Church attendance is at its lowest in history, especially among young people, yet somehow the village festa is somewhat getting bigger and more popular than ever, especially among young people. In 1967, 82% of Catholics went to church on Sunday. By 2017, that figure had dropped to less than 37%. Within the next 5 years, it will further drop to 20%, and within the next 15 years, it will fizzle to 10%. On the other hand, 4 years ago, Professor Vince Marmara and Lou Bondi teamed up with the president of Malta, and they started a nationwide scientific study to try to understand how Maltese people look at themselves and how they look at their culture and their country. It's called the State of the Nation, and every year they ask a sample of people the same questions to see how the country is changing over time. That study also shows that faith is on the decline. Fewer people say they believe in God now than they did when this study started. No surprise there. But what's interesting is this. One of the questions they ask is, to you, what is the most important element of the Maltese culture? Every year for the past 3 years, the Village Festa topped the list. Consistently, people keep saying that the most important element of the Maltese culture is the Village Festa. Even more important than art, than music, even more important than traditional food, which is saying something considering we've also been ranked the most obese country in the continent. Twice in the last 3 years, even Good Friday ranked ahead of pastizzi and everything else, coming in only second to the festa. And the church, for the most part, hates this. Now, I believe I know what you're thinking. There's hardly a contradiction between dwindling church numbers and the popularity of the festa. The village festa is, after all, anything but religious. It's essentially a street party. Of course, it's popular. Young people do it for the party. Except that this is not 1960 anymore. The festa is not the only entertainment out there. Young people don't have to wait for the festa to party. They can party whenever, wherever, and however they want. And they do. They can hire brass bands, let off fireworks, and set up all sorts of decorations that can be as wild as they'd like. They don't need to make decorations with faces of angels and saints that they tell them about at the mass they no longer want to go to. And yet, every year, thousands of young people return to the village festa. I came to this realization a couple of summers ago when I was overhearing a conversation between a group of friends in their 20s. I am distantly related to one of them, and it was a family gathering, just so that you don't think I eavesdrop on random people like that. And one of the friends says, "Yo, before I forget, I found really cheap flights to Ibiza. Wanna go partying for a weekend?" And he mentioned a weekend in August when he found flights. And half of the group goes, "No, man, we can't. It's Festa week that week." Surely, if it was all about the party, they'd go to Ibiza. Now, this is not to say that there aren't people who are only interested in the party. Indeed, even for many of those who answer the State of the Nation questions, the festa is only a party. But there's another underlying, more fascinating reality that I want to focus on today. The group of young people who prefer the festa over Ibiza don't just go to it for the party. They actively work for it. They organize it and they build it. And there are a few thousands of them across the island. Now, you could say a few thousands is not a lot. Yeah, sure, it's not a lot. A few thousands is not a lot. But think about this. What are the cause, social, political, whatever, attracts to it a few thousand young people to it nowadays? In a country where young people are taught to be uninterested, lazy, and self-absorbed, these young people are spending hours after work organizing, rehearsing, and fundraising for that 1 week of the year. They're pulling all-nighters to build hundreds of thousands of euros worth of decorations and to set them up. And in a country consumed by greed, no one is expecting to get paid. Unfortunately, there's not enough research on this, and I think it's a phenomenon worth studying. But I fear we often dismiss it too quickly by saying stuff like, yeah, of course the festa is popular because it's a tradition, and all traditions are popular. People love traditions, that's why the festa lasted, because traditions kind of stick with us. Except that they don't. Lace making was a tradition. Lonella was a tradition. I don't see any one of you ladies here sporting an onnell, and I don't think any one of you worked some lace this week. Lana was a beloved tradition, but no man here, I think, would love to crack a spontaneous verse right here, right now, do you? As much as we'd love to think that traditions stick with us, most of them die. Some argue that even our biggest tradition, the Maltese language itself, is slowly dying away. So in the face of the one tradition that not only survives, but gets bigger and more popular organically, we should at least stop and put our usual judgmental thoughts on pause and try to observe what's happening there, because probably it's nothing short of extraordinary. I won't claim to know for sure why this is happening, and I'm not a researcher, but my job has got me thinking a lot about it over the years, so I will humbly give it a try. As journalists, we don't have the sexiest job out there, but it affords us a privilege that very few other jobs has. Over the years, my job forced me to meet some of the wealthiest and some of the poorest people out there, some of the most powerful and some of the most miserable, some of the most successful and some of the ones who fell through all the cracks. I met people who killed someone and people who literally gave their life to someone. Politicians who climbed to the top and people who couldn't even find a job. And because on the media it's our job to tell stories, I often found myself listening to these people's stories for hours. And in 13 years, I've met hundreds of them. And what I learned is that the happy people, those who are content and lead relatively joyful and peaceful lives, aren't the ones who have the most money or influence or who have the most rights, freedom, or the widest array of choices in life. Those things matter, of course. Research consistently shows that people are generally happier in wealthier and freer countries, and the more successful and well-off people I met were generally happier. But the one thing that's consistent among the happier people I met is that they took responsibility for something in their lives, in their families, or in their community. It's not the people who took the easy way out or who managed to find a way to get paid without having to show up for their job, or the people who looked out only for themselves or those who lived a comfortable life. It's the people who chose the heaviest weight they could possibly lift and made all the sacrifices necessary to carry it. Some took on responsibility voluntarily. Activists and journalists who fought for a cause or for a right or against an injustice. Politicians who left their lucrative jobs to go solve a big problem in their country. Men and women who left their jobs to raise 8 or 10 kids. Others who adopted or fostered. People who gave a kidney to someone they literally just met on the street. Priests who spent 40 years trying to feed a remote village in Africa. People who got out of a really, really bad addiction. Others were hit by unimaginable tragedy, and they took on responsibility because the other option was to despair. Common men and women who worked through incredibly tough problems, betrayal and hardship to save their families and their relationships. Young men and women who fell ill and turned their catastrophes into fundraising and awareness campaigns to help others like them. Most of these people didn't ask whether the problem was their fault before taking on responsibility. They just did it. They just lifted the weight. And in serving their families and their community, they found meaning. They found purpose. Of course, sometimes the circumstances are so difficult that no matter how much responsibility you take, the situation just doesn't get better. Sometimes the injustice lingers on. Sometimes the illness kills you. That's life. I asked this once to a terminally ill man who I had just interviewed, and he said, "Oh, it's bad when that happens. But I don't regret taking on the fight, because the other option, to do nothing about it, would have made me a more miserable man." I didn't just make up these examples. These are all people who I met and who inspired me greatly, who filled me with the hope that the future can be good because people are good at heart. My most recent encounter was with the priest last month, the one who spent years as a missionary. He's well over 60 now, and he's back because the church said, you can come back now. You've done enough, you can come back and rest. And so he's back, and I asked him, "So how is it now?" And he said, "I want to go back." And I said, "What do you mean you want to go back? You have everything here." And he goes, "That's exactly it. I have everything. and it's boring. Yes, but it's safe. You're not gonna die because some mosquito is gonna bite you in the middle of the night or some jungle criminal gang is gonna break down your mud hut. Yeah, but there's no adventure here, he said. I don't just wanna be alive. I wanna feel alive. And I felt alive the most when I was handed the responsibility of that village and its people. And it got me thinking, what if that's exactly what our young people are looking for? The challenge to take on a great sacrifice, a great responsibility. 100 years ago, our young men had no option but to take responsibility to protect their country because they needed to go to war. Our young women had no option but to take responsibility and raise large families by themselves through terrible starvation and illness. Now, we are healthier, wealthier, safer, and freer than we ever were at any point in human history. And yet somehow, sometimes, it feels like it's never been worse. What if we're bored? What if there's no adventure? Politicians once spoke to us about having great dreams, about going to the moon, about gaining independence. Nowadays, they seem to be unable to imagine a world that's better than the one we already have. And so they either ask us to go to some glorious point in the past or tweak the present. But there's no adventure there. No wonder so many young people seem so uninterested. Even political discourse has shifted. In believing that people are seeking simply comfort, politicians rarely air just to take responsibility anymore. Instead, they speak almost only about rights. We went from ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, to at the next budget, we're going to give you some more free money. You think that's all people want to hear about, free money and rights, and yet the polls show that people have hardly ever been less interested in politics. We gave 16-year-olds the glorious right to vote, and yet polls are barely registering any increased interest among youths of that age. Meanwhile, social media and the modern markets tell young people to seek happiness in anything comforting in the short term. And governments are doing all they can so that we don't have to raise our children ourselves. There's childcare for that. And so that we don't have to take responsibility to care or even know who our neighbors are and who our community are. There's other people doing that so that we can stay longer at work. Young people don't even have to take responsibility to eat anymore. Our great-grandparents had to grow their own food if they wanted to eat. Our grandparents didn't have to grow it, but they at least had to cook it. Our parents could order a pizza and go pick it up from the cuisine. Our children don't even have to take the responsibility to walk to the cuisine because the courier is right there by their door with their pizza. We sometimes do talk about responsibility, but when we do, we often trivialize it. We say stuff like, to be a responsible citizen is to stop at a red light, to offer your seat on a bus to a pregnant woman, to help an elderly man with his groceries, to pay your taxes. Those are the basics. Those should go without saying. How about taking on a cause? How about trying to fix a problem in your community? Or if you can't do anything of that kind, have 2, 3, maybe even 4 children if you can and if you can afford them. Because our country right now needs strong, smart, independent, and resilient men and women, maybe more than it needs our cats and dogs. Our young people are being handed fewer and fewer opportunities to take responsibility, and we're killing the ideals we wanted them to believe in so much when they were younger. We showed them Disney movies and read them stories about all sorts of heroes who took on responsibility, who looked malevolence in the eye and with great courage and responsibility saved the other characters in the story and emerged victorious. And we saw our children with a glimmer in their eyes, thinking that maybe someday they could also be a hero themselves. And then, when they grow up enough, we give them the ridiculous reality check and snap them out of it. Don't be naive, we tell them. That's just a movie. Life isn't like that. Nice guys finish last. Look out for yourself. Become the evil guy because everyone out there is out to get you. But guess what? Perhaps the young child in all of us still wants to be the hero, to take on the adventure. And Disney is not the only place brimming with inspiring stories of young men and women who slay dragons, who look evil in the eye to stay true to their principles. We call them saints. And perhaps deep in our hearts, that's why we love them so much. And that's why we want to celebrate them with a great festa every year. Perhaps the festa is one of the last remaining places where our young people can take on a great responsibility for their community in trying to emulate a saint who took a great responsibility for theirs. Maybe they're flocking to the festa because they feel that's where they can make the biggest sacrifice they can imagine to produce the most beautiful art, music, and decorations as they see them. It's where they can quite literally shoulder the responsibility of the most precious thing they have in the village, the statue. Perhaps with all its flaws, and it's filled with flaws, the festa is where the adventure is. Perhaps that's how they feel alive the most. Maybe these young people are trying to send us a message that they want to take responsibility for their community. Some of them are doing it by working for the festa, but maybe the festa is just one example. Others are maybe going into activism, taking on some big cause, leading some scout group. And others are still in their bedrooms, doom scrolling on TikTok, waiting for that call to adventure. But perhaps they are showing us that this is what they want more of from their leaders. I say, fortunately, the church is one of the few remaining leaders in our modern world that calls on us to take responsibility, because at its core of Christianity is a man who, despite having done nothing wrong, takes on the responsibility for everyone's faults. A man, if you believe, who rips open the most beautiful place that can ever exist, heaven, with the ultimate sacrifice towards humanity. And irrespective of whether you believe or not, that's a very clear message that the most beautiful things lie in taking responsibility. Thank you.